I, 41M, have been married to my wife for 20 years, and both of us come from fractured, chaotic families. My wife's parents divorced and were both substance addicts. Her father passed from liver failure, and her mother has cooled off a bit and retired. As for me, my parents went through a vicious, violent divorce when I was a child. My father moved 10 states away to escape the craziness, and my mother has never changed. My mother is a terrible woman. She systematically abused me throughout my whole childhood and continued to be a violent, bitter, mean, and aggressive person toward me throughout my whole life. I could sit here for hours and write about the things she's done. She used the courts to destroy my father's life for decades, and once he was out of the house, she turned her anger on me with physical and emotional violence. When I was 16, she expelled me from the house and left me homeless. I had to go from house to house, figuring out where to live, and try to graduate high school. I ended up living with an older boy that was about 4 years older than me, and I had to engage in an intimate relationship with him in order to secure that housing. I was not into men, I did not want to be into men, and I had to endure something that destroyed me in order to not be sleeping on the street. When I turned 18, I was able to start working at a better job, and was able to get out of that bad situation and start my life from scratch. My wife and I have worked hard to achieve a stable, middle-class lifestyle. We both attended college at night for many years, and now we have good jobs and a house in the suburbs. Out of a sense of duty to our family, I sought to include my extended family in our lives and allowed a relationship with strict boundaries between my mother and my 5 children. For the most part, she has been fairly stable for about 20 years. By stable, I mean that we could have routine contact about once a month during that time period, with minimal disruptive behavior. She has never acknowledged her abuse toward me, as she is an extremely selfish person. Everything about our past has been left unsaid. Over the last 2 years, my mother has completely unraveled. Her second husband decided to leave her for his own health and sanity, and she instantly reverted to the most cruel and bizarre behavior imaginable. All aspects of her life have been affected. She is calling the police, suing him in family court, alienating large parts of her family from one another, all while trying to tell my children why their grandfather is a disgusting human being based on how she feels about him. Once I saw this happening, I decided, that's it, not again, and took action. At the beginning of this year, I wrote a very courteous note to my mother asking her to reevaluate the way she's been behaving toward me and my family. When I say it was neutral and courteous, I really mean it. I checked it 5 times. She responded by calling me terrible names, such as ungrateful piece of crap, and screaming various other profanities on the phone at me. I blocked her from my phone, then she did the same thing to my wife. So I informed my mother by email that I'd like to maintain distance until she works on herself in therapy or with her divorce mediator. Things remained quiet for about 6 months. This morning, I woke up to a series of bizarre emails from my mother asserting that she wants to see my children for their upcoming birthday, and giving me 24 hours to provide acceptable dates for visitation or be prepared for a legal summons to family court. I'm floored. This woman is the equivalent of a schoolyard bully, following me around in life, tormenting me nonstop until I just want to cry. The worst part of a bully is that when you ask them to lay off you for even 5 minutes, they take this as a cue to keep it up even more. I took one look at this and thought, holy crap, this woman is clearly out of her mind. Now, I know in the post title I said she's suing me. I work in the legal field and know that until I've been summoned to appear, I have not been sued. So, no, she's only threatening to sue me right now. Sorry for using the hyperbole, but I find myself in the same bizarre, out-of-touch reality that everyone in this person's life experiences. This batcrap insane woman forced me to see my own father at a McDonald's when we were kids for 2 hours every 2 weeks, as per the court order, while she waited outside in a running car. I was only allowed to see him in this fashion because she hated him and didn't care what this would do to her own kids. There were more than a few times when the clock would strike 8, and she would come screaming into the McDonald's, threatening to call the cops and have my dad arrested for kidnapping while grabbing us by the arms and pulling us out of the store. This is what she's capable of doing with family court. I had a literal, hyperventilating panic attack on the floor of my office this morning. I have sought to be respectful, mature, and use good decision-making this whole time. My wife and I have an extremely secure marriage, and she agrees with me 100% through all of this. I find myself wishing that my mother would just go to her grave already, and just please leave me alone. She's like this inescapable bully who will never, under any circumstances, leave a person alone until she's proven that she can hurt them. I don't even care what she's experienced in her life. I just need to be away from her. So that's my off-my-chest story. I've been living with this shame, fear, and lingering self-hatred for 30+ years, all while trying to be a super dad and a great career man. I called a local family law practice today to get a referral. I'm going to ask them to send a demand letter to her, to try and get her to back off, but just look at what this has come to. I have to shell money out of my own pocket to protect myself and my kids from my insane mother. Thank you for letting me tell you my story, just typing it out helps. Update 1. I posted this on Thursday when I was experiencing a serious amount of turmoil. Since then, I've calmed down a lot and had the good judgment to talk this over with the important people in my life. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for the words of encouragement and support. There were some surprising insights from many of the posters, and I found myself agreeing with and appreciating many of the stories of support that were shared. I now understand that I am not the only person with a domineering, selfish, easily enraged parent. To all the people who blamed me for being a victim of my mother and somehow being at fault for all this, I want to use some strong language, but I'll just ask you to please think about how fortunate your life has been that you haven't experienced what I have. So, on to the update. As it turns out, only 2 states in the union have codified grandparents' rights, California and New York, and I do live in New York. Basically, in New York, A grandparent does not have the automatic right to have access to grandchildren, but a grandparent does have automatic standing to file a petition to be heard in family court. The petition can be squashed, but they can file the petition. I do want to get back to this later. I consulted with a family law attorney on Friday, and he helped me understand the situation and craft a strategy. He was generous enough not to require a retainer unless and until I'm served with legal papers. He explained that the grandparent does have standing to file a petition based on a pre-existing relationship with the grandchildren, but that she would most likely not be able to overcome the desires of two married parents who are both exercising their judgment for the health and safety of their children. He explained that in New York, our simple desire to terminate a relationship would most likely be overcome in court. However, if we introduce some of the specific actions that she's exhibited over the last few years, such as familial alienation, adult humor near children, uncontrollable anger, hoarding of house cats, or dangerous operation of a motor vehicle, we would very likely prevail in a court setting. He explained that the good thing is that we had already restricted contact between our children and my mother to about once per month, and that in his experience, he had never seen a court order for grandparent visitation for more often than once a month, for 1 hour per session. I try to be reasonable, so I said, okay, the worst case scenario is supervised status quo. I did broach the topic of a restraining order, and I was quickly schooled on how that works. Despite the Reddit attorneys who all assured me that I can automatically get a restraining order, well, I hate to say that you're all completely wrong. An order of protection has to be accompanied by some facilitating act of domestic violence. Because I've only been harassed and alarmed by words, I can't be granted a restraining order. However, if my mother causes some disorderly act, such as coming to my house and causing a ruckus, that could trigger an order if, and only if, I document it by having the police come and detailing a report. So, keep that in mind next time you recommend a restraining order. They're not easy to get. The attorney recommended that I send a private cease and desist to my mother via certified mail and email. I decided to write a 2-page, brutal takedown of this woman in order to 1, blow off some steam, and 2, document in writing my concerns and try to get ahead of her legal maneuvering. I decided to take a two-pronged approach. First, I sent this cease and desist to her on Friday at lunchtime via email and certified mail. Then, I took a page out of her playbook and publicly scorched the earth to apply social pressure to her. I emailed and texted every single member of my extended family, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, my stepfather, my father, and spoke to several of them to tell them exactly what was happening. Whether they wanted to hear it or not, I sent them intimate details of my mother's abuse and my decision to cut her off for the welfare of myself and my family. My reasoning there is simple. My mother's abuse thrives behind closed doors and an embarrassed silence. For 30 years, I've had to hear, "Oh, you know, that's just the way your mother is," while people stood by and let her act in the most insane and violent ways you can imagine. Last year, my mother got angry at my stepfather and tried to run him over with her car. Then, she crashed her car into the front door of his business, screaming and ranting in public. Do you know what people did? They surely called the police or an ambulance and had her monitored for her safety, right? No, my sister quickly threw her into her car and drove her away so she wouldn't be arrested. My stepfather was so embarrassed that he took the crashed car, drove it to a parking spot, and then paid out of pocket for the damage to the front of his business. This is what happens in families dealing with a crazy person. They cover it up, hoping it will someday get better. Well, I'm not comfortable with this anymore. I sought to publicly embarrass and pressure her for a change. Anyway, by Friday afternoon, my mother got the message and sent me emails telling me that I can stop attacking her and maligning her to my family. She indicated that she would abandon any legal efforts to seek visitation with my children. This was a relief, but to be fair, I was almost looking forward to having a public forum to describe her antics in court. Nevertheless, it seems like she's backing off for the moment. The fallout and damage to my extended family are most likely severe and permanent. However, my wife and I discussed this fully and have decided that this is the direction we're going in. We'll just have to have holidays by ourselves if the family can't be loyal and supportive to me. On to the last point, and I really want to drive this home. In 1991, my mother conducted an incredibly vicious divorce against my father. I mean, she literally sought to destroy him, and she did. He was completely beaten by her. One of the things that my father told me about just this weekend was that at the time my grandparents on his side sought to have guaranteed visitation with us after the divorce. My mother actually went to court on that specific topic, and specifically litigated that she was the custodial mother and had sole decision-making about who the children would be around. The court ruled at the time that in fact, there was no right for a grandparent to see children, and my mother successfully was able to keep me away from my very loving and happy grandparents for years. I was only able to see them during court-mandated visitation with my own father. The law in New York changed in 2000 so that grandparents' rights came into effect, too late to help me unfortunately. I want to really drive this home. The freaking audacity of this woman to go to court on her own behalf and state in a court of law that she, as the custodial mother of children, has the sole and ultimate decision on who her children have relationships with, and then to 35 years later attempt to use the changes in law to assert that she has grandparents' rights to visitation, despite the wishes of the both parents, was too much for me to bear. That alone made me say, no way, not happening under my watch. So that's the update. Long-winded, yes, but it makes me feel good to type this out. I'm finally able to unburden the unbearable shame and embarrassment of what happened to me to members of my family, and I won't allow myself to be ignored anymore. I'm 41, and my selfish, insane baby boomer abusive mother is in her mid-70s and has no power over me anymore. I'm sick and tired of bottling this up. Anyone who doesn't like it can go suck an egg. I deserve to have loyal and faithful people in my life.